We have breaking news here on CBS Sports HQ. Cowboys offensive guard Zack Martin has informed the team that he plans to retire, according to NFL Network. The future Hall of Famer has spent his entire 11-year career with the Cowboys. He is a 7-time first-team All-Pro. No offensive guard has ever been named first-team All-Pro more times than Martin. He was a member of the NFL's All-2010s team and was scheduled to become a free agent this offseason. Pete Prisco had him ranked as the number 66 free agent in his top 100. Let's bring in Garrett Podell, who covers the Cowboys for us on a daily basis. Garrett, this is a guy who, Mr. Cowboy, I mean, a Hall of Fame career, he's going to get there. I don't know if it's first ballot, but it seems like it could be. What did he mean to this franchise?
Well, Chris, you kind of said it right there by calling him Mr. Cowboy. He meant everything to this franchise. When I would walk around the Dallas Cowboys locker room covering the team on the ground here in Dallas the last 2 years, I mean, pretty much any time there was ever a key kind of locker room thing going on, it was run by Zack Martin. I mean, Micah Parsons, who is probably the most vocal quote or colorful quote on this team, he would always defer to Zack Martin when talking about certain issues or things. And in terms of the on-field production, I mean, there's maybe you could make a case, no better interior offensive lineman in NFL history. When you look at, like what you said, the 7-time first-team All-Pro selections tied with John Hanna and Randall McDaniel for the most ever. And then also in terms of guys who really, as the Cowboys like to say, represented the star and really just appreciated and being a Dallas Cowboy, Zack Martin would have to be up there in terms of just the pride he carried year after year representing this team, whether they were winning and going to the playoffs or even in a year like this past one when they went 7-10.
He was expected to be a top 100 free agent if he was healthy enough. I'm guessing that some of these injury issues that he's had, one that limited to 10 games this past season, had a lot to do with this likely decision here. What do you know about how he came to this decision?
Yeah, well, the last time I had a chance to speak to Zack Martin was when it was announced he was going to have his third ankle surgery of his career and missed the end of the 2024 season. And he told me that he spent a lot of time speaking with former Cowboys Pro Bowl center Travis Frederick on the phone shortly when he made the decision to have that third ankle surgery of his career and miss the rest of the season. And Travis Frederick was another really high caliber offensive lineman for the Cowboys. And he and Martin, when they would do warm-ups, they would go through wide receiver drills, almost running routes in pregame to get loose. Those two guys were as tight as could be. And Frederick is someone who had to retire early with Guillain-Barré syndrome in the late 2010s, early 2020s. And so the fact that Martin picked up the phone and called Frederick isn't surprising because they're close friends, but it kind of gave you a sense of that retirement was very seriously on his mind. If Frederick was someone who he had an extensive conversation into the night about when he had that surgery, which is something he told me. He said they had a really extensive conversation.
It's the start of a new era for the Cowboys. Brian Schottenheimer taking over. I know there's a lot of work that needs to be done to get this franchise to the level that they want to be at. What kind of a hole, though, is Martin going to leave in the middle of that line?
I mean, it's an absolutely massive hole because it's where they've been trying to run the ball in Dallas over the last few years, and it really hasn't worked for them at that spot really since the 2022 season when Tony Pollard was one of the league leaders in yards per touch from scrimmage. And the last couple years, it kind of really been a struggle. Pollard, he broke over 1,000 yards for them in 2023, but it was a lot less efficient when he was coming off the fibula injury he suffered in the playoffs against the 49ers the prior season. And then this year, Rico Dowdle did come on strong the back half of the season to break the 1,000-yard barrier mark, but they were really unable to get the run game going when Dak Prescott was in there healthy, and it wasn't as much of a priority for this offense. So I would say it's a massive hole, not only in that line on the field, but also in this locker room for a Cowboys team that's kind of in transition because they have a laundry list of free agents this offseason that's now not including Martin, but there's going to be a significant turnover both with the new coaching staff coming in and the type of players who will be in the locker room in 2025.
Yeah, you mentioned the free agents, Garrett, and there's certainly a lot that the Cowboys are going to have to do, and he wasn't the only big-name free agent that the Cowboys have. Garrett Podell with us here on CBS Sports HQ. The Cowboys with 3 of the top 50 free agents, according to Pete Prisco. DeMarcus Lawrence, one of the others. Cowboys new era, but it almost seems more like a rebuild than anything at this point, especially when you consider what the Eagles are doing and what the Commanders are on their way to doing with Jaden Daniels as one of the best quarterbacks in the league and a young team.
The Bucs lately. For the fourth consecutive season, Tampa Bay, your division winners, advancing to the playoffs for a fifth straight year. That is the longest active streak by a team in the NFC. But some big changes coming to Tampa Bay this offseason. Most notably, they lost their offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen, who is now in charge of the Jags right up the road there. And there's also questions about Chris Godwin, another key free agent to address. But there's no question when it comes to the dominance that the Bucs have had in this division over the last 4 years. They have won it 4 times. This division really just like a division of runs. The Saints won it 4 times previously to that, and then the Panthers had it 3 times in a row. But the Bucs right now are on top. Maybe some work to do going forward. Let's welcome in our NFL team, I almost said NBA team, of Bryant V-Mac McFadden and John Breach to discuss what the NFC South can do to get a little better going into 2025. So, guys, let's start at the top with the champs. There's no more Liam Cohen. It's now Josh Grizzard's role over there at OC, and it seems like the biggest order of business there is to get Chris Godwin back. Breach, what do you think about the Bucs? How can they improve going into the offseason?
Yeah, that's obviously something that is on their radar. We already know they've kind of extended the deadline on his contract so they can get a deal done. If you look at Chris Godwin, meant to this offense, he played a huge part before he suffered that season-ending injury back in October. He had 50 catches for 576 yards. He was averaging over 80 yards per game. So he is obviously a key part of that offense, and you want to have him back when you're breaking in that new offensive coordinator. Baker Mayfield would love to have him back. But then the other side of this, the Buccaneers had a very prolific offense. What they didn't have was a defense that could stop the pass. So I think that's another part where the Bucs are going to have to focus. This team gave up the 4th most passing yards in the NFL last season. They didn't generate a lot of pass rush outside of Vita Vea and Kawaja Cansey. You look at their linebackers. We saw Levante David's about to be a free agent, so they could stand to add someone in the draft or free agency at the linebacker position. And even corners, they could probably use some depth there. So I think the Buccaneers, yes, you need Chris Godwin, but I think the focus for them probably needs to be adding some depth pieces on defense.
Yeah, Chris Godwin is the top priority for this team. When you look at their free agents, he's shown the ability, John, to come off season-ending injuries and still give you great sound production. This will be his second injury that he had to miss the rest of the year, but he's been able to bounce back. And then you got to look at life after Mike Evans. Mike Evans is still putting up outstanding numbers, but you have to get prepared for life after Mike Evans because he's closer to the end of his career than the beginning. And Chris Godwin is clearly lockstep to be able to fill that wide receiver 1 option whenever Mike Evans decides to call it quits. And then you look at the defense, I'm right there with you. You know, trading away Carlton Davis, it seemed like it was a good move at the time, but they really missed him in terms of his lockdown potential and the depth. You know, Jamel Dean was the next best corner, but he missed a lot of time because of injuries, and they didn't have the necessary production to follow when you were missing Jamel Dean. So trying to add more depth in the secondary, especially the cornerback position, would be a big-time necessity for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
You know, despite those defensive deficiencies, the Bucs were the first team to start the year 4-6 and still reach the playoffs in back-to-back seasons. So I don't know, maybe the Bengals need to take some notes there when it comes to how the Bucs are finishing out the regular season. Let's talk about the Falcons, guys. You know, a year ago we were talking about this big move. Kirk Cousins was going to take the top off of this Atlanta squad, and now we're talking about his replacement, Michael Penix. That era set to begin. B-Mac, what excites you about what the Falcons can do around Penix? And to take it a step further, how do they set him up for success this offseason?
Well, what excites me about this offense, they have the ability to be one of the more explosive offenses in the National Football League, starting with their quarterback in Michael Penix. I love Bijan Robertson. He has the ability to be and do it all back for their offense, an offensive weapon. I love unlocking Drake May. We saw what he did this season with Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix. He is a bona fide wide receiver 1. You look at Darnell Mooney, became a big-time playmaker. Potentially adding more talent to the tight end room will be huge. And then when you factor in Michael Penix, I mean, John, he did a really, really good job stepping in for this team towards the latter part of 2024, and he didn't blink at all. The moment never seemed to be too big for him. And you have to be optimistic about Penix, knowing that he is QB1 to start this offseason process as he gets ready for the upcoming regular season. So he will get all the necessary reps to be at his best and to be most importantly comfortable for this offense moving forward. So you have to really like their chances in knowing the type of talent he has at the quarterback position.
Yeah, and B-Mac is absolutely right. You love the talent that the Falcons have around Michael Penix, whether that's Drake London, Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts. So the offense is pretty stacked. They'll have to worry a little bit about the center position because Drew Dahlman's set to be a free agent. So that's a hole you're going to have to fill. Let's not forget sometimes the best offense is a good defense. If you don't want Michael Penix being forced to go out there and win shootouts every week next season, you really have to fortify that defense. The Falcons are going to have to make some moves during free agency, especially at pass. They need to add a pass rusher. This team had just 31 sacks last season. That was the second fewest in the NFL. We see Matt Judon. He's going to be a free agent. They have defensive tackles Grady Jarrett, David Onyemata. Both those guys are over 30, so they're getting up there in age. They're both expensive. Maybe one or both of them become cap casualties. You look in the secondary, they probably could stand to add some cornerback depth. So I think as much as they're going to want to help Michael Penix, they're really going to need to focus on the defense. And one problem for the Falcons is they don't have.
Hey, Cowboys fan, let's talk about the draft because things just got interesting. You know how we've been eyeing running back Ashton Jeanty as a potential pick for Dallas. Well, there's a real chance he might not even be available when the Cowboys are on the clock. And that could change everything. Jeanty was seen as a strong option to boost our running game, but now with recent developments, the Cowboys may need to rethink their strategy. So what does this mean for the team? Should they stick to their original plan or explore new possibilities? That's exactly what we're going to break down today. And I want to hear from you. Shed, all right, let's talk about Ashton Jeanty. This guy had an absolutely dominant season at Boise State, putting up mind-blowing numbers, 2,601 rushing yards and 29 touchdowns. That kind of production turns heads, and it's no surprise he's been considered one of the top running back prospects in the draft. But here's the twist. Jeanty decided to skip the on-field workouts at the NFL Scouting Combine. Instead, he's focusing on medical evaluations and interviews, according to reports from NFL Network. That move raises questions. Will it hurt his draft stock? Or does it mean he's confident enough in his tape to let his past performances speak for themselves? And here's where it gets tricky for the Cowboys. There's a good chance Jeanty will be off the board before Dallas even gets a shot at him. So if he's gone, what's next? Should the Cowboys pivot to another position or maybe consider a different running back later in the draft? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Jeanty will still be available when Dallas picks? Or will another team snatch him up first? If Ashton Jeanty is off the board by the time the Cowboys pick, what's the next move? Well, there are a few interesting options Dallas could consider. One name that stands out is wide receiver Tetairoa McMillan. He's drawn comparisons to Mike Evans because of his size, athleticism, and ability to make contested catches. Adding a dynamic receiver like McMillan could take pressure off CeeDee Lamb and give Dak Prescott another big-time weapon. But would passing on a running back be a mistake? Another strategy to consider is a trade back. Instead of forcing a pick, the Cowboys could move down in the draft, accumulate more selections, and address multiple needs. Think about it. Dallas could target key positions like defensive line, offensive line, or even the secondary, all areas where they could use more depth. And let's not forget there are still solid running backs available later in the draft. Someone like Omarion Hampton could be a great value pick if Dallas decides to go that route. So what do you think? Should the Cowboys go all in on a receiver like McMillan? Stick with a running back later in the draft? Or trade back to maximize their picks? Vote in the poll and let's see where the fan base stands. If the Cowboys decide to trade back, it could open up some intriguing possibilities. Moving down a few spots in the draft would allow Dallas to collect extra picks, giving them more flexibility to fill key positions. One potential trade partner, the Green Bay Packers. A deal with them could give the Cowboys additional mid-round selections, allowing them to draft multiple impact players instead of putting all their hopes on one pick. For example, with those extra picks, Dallas could target running back Omarion Hampton, who brings a physical running style, or safety Xavier Watts, a playmaker in the secondary. This approach would help the team build depth and strengthen multiple areas at once. Would you be in favor of a trade back if it meant securing more talent across different positions? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let's discuss the best move for the Cowboys. No Ashton Jeanty? No problem. The Cowboys still have plenty of exciting options in the draft, whether it's Tetairoa McMillan, a trade back, or another surprise move. Now it's your turn. Which strategy do you think Dallas should take? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let's debate.